Okay, in this lecture, we'll discuss about the anatomy of the small and large intestine. I hope you have already seen this in practical, both the small intestine, large intestine, as well as the rectum, as well as the anal canal. So now we'll discuss some important features, anatomical features of this intestine. So these are the objectives. So list the different parts of the small and large intestine, then describe the anatomy of the duodenum, jejunum and ileum as well as the colon with respect to the shape, length, size, the site of beginning, termination, the peritoneal coverings, arterial supply, lymphatic drainage, relations, uh, all the features of the small as well as the large intestine. So as you know, the small intestine is divided into uh, two main features. One is the fixed part and the free mobile part. So a small part of the small intestine is fixed and the remaining large part is freely mobile. The fixed part is mostly, it will be the most of the duodenum. Okay, so this is fixed part, so it is not covered by peritoneum, so no mesentery is there, no mesentery. Only in the anterior surface there will be covering of the peritoneum. Other part is fixed because it is totally attached to the posterior abdominal wall, so it is called as fixed part. It is not non-mobile. So that part is the most of the parts of the duodenum. Then the free mobile part is that part which is totally covered by the peritoneum. So it has a long mesentery, so it can easily move. Okay, that part is the jejunum and the ileum. Okay, so if you see here, so this is the duodenum behind, which is attached to the posterior abdominal wall. So this part of the small intestine, that is the duodenum, it is totally adherent. And if you see here, this is the one of the layer of the peritoneal fold. So it is behind the peritoneum. So it is retroperitoneal. So it is fixed. But most of the remaining part, if you see here, the continuation which is cut here, that is the jejunum and ileum, will be freely mobile. So it has a long mesentery. This is the mesentery. This is called as the mesentery. Okay, which is nothing but the two folds of the peritoneum, which will cover the small intestine. So this long mesentery will help in the movement of the whole of the remaining part of the small intestine. Okay, so this is the mobile part, jejunum and ileum. So here you can see here, this is the duodenum, which is totally fixed because it is not covered by peritoneum except the anterior layer. So it is retroperitoneal, behind the peritoneum, retroperitoneal. And here, even though it is not shown here, the mesentery is shown. The small intestine, remaining jejunum and ileum are not shown, but you can see the mesentery, long mesentery, which helps in its movement. Now we'll understand what exactly is the mesentery. So what exactly is the mesentery? As I showed you, this is the mesentery. Mesentery is nothing but the two layers of the peritoneum. It is the two folds of the peritoneum connecting the small intestine to the posterior abdominal wall. Okay, so this is nothing but the peritoneal, two layers of the peritoneum, which will come here. As you can see here, small part of the ileum. So if you see here, the peritoneum is coming, it covers the whole of the ileum and goes back. The second fold will go back and get attached to the posterior abdominal wall. Okay, so it is held attached to posterior abdominal wall with a long fold of peritoneum, which is called as the mesentery. So mesentery is two layers of peritoneum, as you can see here, the two layers connecting the small intestine to the posterior abdominal, connecting the small intestine, okay, to the posterior abdominal wall. It has a root and free border. The mesentery has a root which is attached part to the posterior abdominal wall, and this free part which is attached to the small intestine. Okay, so this mesentery has a root which is attached part to the posterior abdominal wall and a free border which is in contact with the small intestine. The root is just 6 inches long. So this is the root here, attached part, which is just 6 inches long. It extends from the duodenojejunal junction to the ileocecal junction. From the duodenojejunal junction, between the duodenum and jejunum, here will be that, okay, to the ileocecal junction. Ileocecal, this is the ileum and this is the cecum of the large intestine. So extend from here to here. So that is just the root. Okay, and the long fold will be the free fold border will be here. So the free border will be 6 meters. See, the compare the size. The root will be just 6 inches, but the free borders will be 6 meters long. It contains the jejunum and ileum and the blood vessels, lymphatics, nerves, and some fat. If you see here between the two folds, you can see some dots here, red and blue dots. These are nothing but the small vessels which are passing through these two folds and supply the small intestine. So these are the arteries and veins, lymphatics, nerves, as well as even small quantity of fat will be present between these two layers. So these two layers will help in the passage of blood vessels which are coming from behind to supply the small intestine, jejunum and ileum. Okay. So did you get this? Uh, did you understand what exactly it means? The mesentery. It is nothing but the, as I said, it is a peritoneal fold. This will be the root, and the free border is this one, which is in contact with the remaining part of the small intestine, that is the jejunum and ileum. So here you can see here. So this is the root of the mesentery. Okay, so this is the duodenum, where the duodenum ends and the beginning of the jejunum. So that it starts from there and goes all the way up to the ileocecal junction. Ileum, this is the cecum. So at that point, this is the whole root, which is the attached part. And as you have seen already, this is the free border. Now coming to the embryological development, we have seen this before, and we'll repeat this, keep on repeating it till you get it. Okay, so this is the relation between the embryological origin of the gut and its arterial supply. As you know, the most of the part of the upper part of the gut, that is from the foregut development. The whole of the GIT is developed from the foregut, midgut, and hindgut up to the second part of duodenum, from the esophagus, stomach, and up to the second part of duodenum. This whole thing is developed from the foregut. From the second part of duodenum up to the transverse colon, up to here, this is developed from the midgut, and the remaining part will be, that is the descending colon, rectum, as well as some part of the anal canal, is all developing from the hindgut. Okay, so why this is important, foregut, midgut, and hindgut? Because there is an artery which supplies the foregut. Okay, so the foregut artery will be the celiac trunk, which supplies the esophagus, stomach, and the part of the duodenum, up to the second part of duodenum. We have seen this is the same celiac artery which we have studied when we studied the stomach. The blood supply for the stomach will be from the branches which are coming from the celiac trunk. Okay, the left gastric, right gastric, gastrocritic, all these are branches from the same celiac trunk, as well as even the splenic artery. Okay, so this is the celiac trunk is the main artery which supplies the foregut. Foregut is that part which is developing, which is the esophagus, stomach, as well as the up to the second part of the duodenum. The midgut artery will be the superior mesenteric artery. So the whole part of the most of the part of the small intestine, that is beginning from the second part of duodenum all the way to the ileum, as well as the jejunum, as well as the ascending colon and part of the transverse colon, which all are developed from the midgut. So it is supplied by the superior mesenteric artery. Then the remaining part is developed from the hindgut, so it is supplied by the inferior mesenteric artery. These are the three arteries which supply the most of the part of the gut, the intestines. Okay, so the foregut supplied by celiac trunk, midgut by the superior mesenteric artery, and the hindgut supplied by the inferior mesenteric artery. So if you understand this concept, then you will easily understand the blood supply for the small intestine as well as the large intestine. As we have seen, the duodenum, it is developing partly from the upper part up to the second part. It is developing from the foregut, and below that part, this part below the second part, it is developing from the midgut. So the duodenum is partly developed from the foregut, partly from the midgut. So similarly, the arterial supply for the duodenum is by the two arteries, from the celiac trunk and the artery of the foregut, and the supramesenteric artery, which is the artery of the midgut. Now, if you study here, you can see here this is the duodenum. Okay, so origin, as we know, it is partly from the foregut and partly from the midgut. So the arterial supply is from the artery of the foregut, that is the celiac trunk, as well as artery of the midgut, that is the supramesenteric artery. So both will supply this part of the duodenum. So there is a duodenum here, which is supplied by both the arteries. Okay, coming to the jejunum and ileum, they are mainly from the midgut. As we have seen, the jejunum and the ileum, the whole thing part is from the midgut. So it is supplied by the artery of the midgut, that is the superior mesenteric, only one artery. The jejunum and ileum, even though they are very long, it is supplied only by the one artery, but the duodenum, even though it is very short, it is supplied by two arteries, artery of the foregut and the midgut. So here they have shown you the celiac trunk. This is the celiac. This is the aorta deep inside. So this is the artery coming from the aorta. This is the celiac trunk, which is the artery of the foregut, and this is the supramesenteric artery, which is the artery of the midgut. Both are supplying the branches to the duodenum. Now coming to some of the important features of the duodenum. So duodenum is C-shaped loop, as you can see in this picture. It is C-shaped, English capital C, like. Okay, so it is C-shaped. The total length of this duodenum is just 10 inches long, or 25 centimeters. Okay, beginning from the pyloroduodenal junction. It begins from the pylorus of the stomach. Okay, so the junction is called as pyloroduodenal junction, beginning, and termination will be into the jejunum through the duodenojejunal flexure. So if you see here, so this is the duodenum and the beginning of the jejunum. So this junction between the duodenum junction is between the duodenum and jejunum is called as the duodenojejunal flexure. So beginning from the pyloroduodenal junction, termination at the duodenojejunal flexure. Peritoneal covering, as we have seen already, it is behind the peritoneum, so it is called as retroperitoneal. So it is fixed, because whenever the structures are retroperitoneal, means behind. Retro means behind the peritoneum, so they will be always fixed. So this duodenum, even though it is just 6 inches, 10 inches long, it is divided into 4 parts. These are 4 parts. Okay, and we'll see what are those 4 parts. Okay, origin, as we know, it is from the both from the foregut and midgut. So the arterial supply is both by the artery of the foregut and midgut, that is the celiac artery and the superior mesenteric artery. Lymphatic drainage is also with similar names, the celiac group of lymph nodes as well as the superior mesenteric group of lymph nodes. Okay. Now coming to the 4 parts of the duodenum. Okay, and what is their length? Okay, the first part, this is the first part, which is called as the horizontal part. It is just 2 inches long. The second part, this is the second part, which is the ascending descending part, which is 3 inches long. This is the 3 inches long descending part. The third part is horizontal part, which is 4 inches long. And the final, the last part, fourth part, this is the fourth part, which is called as the ascending part, which is slightly up, and it is just 1 inch. If you see here, this is the first part, this is the second part, this is the third part, and this is the fourth part, ascending part. And from there begins the jejunum. Okay, so these are the 4 parts of the duodenum. The first part is 2 inches, 3 inches, 4 inches, and last part is just 1 inch. Instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, it is 2, 3, 4, and 1 inches. Okay, so this is, if you calculate total, it will be 10 inches. Okay, so this is the size of the total size of the duodenum, and these are the 4 parts. And you can see here there is a peritoneal fold, which is just covering anteriorly. So it is behind the peritoneum. So this part is fixed. This is the retroperitoneal duodenum. Okay. Coming to the first part, relations, as it is fixed part, so it is easily to locate the relations. So anteriorly, we can see the liver Okay, so here you can see the liver which has been retracted so that you can see easily the first part of the duodenum. Here also you can see here it is retracted behind so that you can see the first part of the duodenum. So anteriorly we have the liver, so which is present here, which is reflected so that you can see. If not, you cannot see the first part because it is covered by the liver anteriorly. Posteriorly, we have the bile duct, as you can see here. This is the bile duct here. Then we have the gastroduodenal artery. So here is the gastroduodenal artery, as well as the portal vein, a very important vein. If you see here, there is a portal vein going to the liver, supplying the liver. Okay, so this is the portal vein, this is the gastroduodenal artery, as well as the bile duct. All these are going behind, so it is posterior relation. Anteriorly, we have the liver. Coming to the second part of the relations, anteriorly again there will be liver. Liver has been removed here so that you can appreciate the duodenum. This is the second part of duodenum. Anteriorly it is covered by the liver. Then the transverse colon. If you see here, this is the ascending colon, this is the transverse colon, which is running anterior to them. Then the coils of the small intestine, it will be filled with the small intestine, jejunum ileum, very long part, but it has been removed so that you can appreciate the duodenum. Coming to the posterior relation, posteriorly, as you can see here, it is behind is the right kidney. Okay. Laterally, we have the right colic flexure. Colic flexure, this end is called as it is also called as the hepatic flexure. Flexure means bending. Okay, between the ascending colon and the transverse colon, there is a bend. This is called as the hepatic flexure, or it is also called as the right colic flexure. Then medially, we have the pancreas. If you see here within this C shape, I said this duodenum is C shape. Within this concavity or C shape, you can see the head of the pancreas. Head of the pancreas, you can appreciate. So it is present medial. Okay. So these are the relations of the second part of duodenum. Then if you cut and open the second part, you can see some important openings. Okay, what are those openings? Okay, so the openings are the very important opening, that is the opening of the bile duct and the main pancreas. These are two ducts, bile duct and the pancreas. If you see, this is the pancreas, and you can see the pancreas, main pancreatic duct. But they both join before opening. They are not opening separately, but they both join and they form the summit, which is called as the major duodenal papillae. This opening, they join together and they form a papilla called as the major duodenal papilla. This is the major duodenal, where both the bile duct and the pancreatic duct open as a common opening. Then apart from that, there is a second opening just above the major duodenal papillae. This is called as the minor duodenal papillae. Above the major, there is minor duodenal papillae. This is the opening of the accessory pancreatic duct. When you study, you will see that the pancreas has two ducts. One is the major duct, which opens here through the major duodenal papillae. There is a smaller duct. This is called as the accessory pancreatic duct. Okay. So why this there is a second duct, we'll study when we study the pancreas and its development. Okay. So this is the minor or accessory pancreatic duct, which opens to the minor duodenal papillae. So there are two openings. One is the major duodenal papillae and the minor duodenal papillae. So it is just 1 inch above the major duodenal papillae. On the summit of the minor duodenal papillae with the opening of the accessory pancreatic. This is the accessory pancreatic duct. This is the major pancreatic duct. This is the accessory. Coming to the relations of the third part of duodenum, so which is the horizontal part, this one. Okay, so that part is anteriorly related to the small intestine, coils of intestine. As I said, for simplification, the small intestine has been removed. If not, they'll be full of small intestines here. Okay. Then the superior mesenteric artery. If you see here, this is the superior mesenteric artery, which is the artery of the midgut. So it passes above this, as well as even the superior mesenteric vein just beside the superior mesenteric artery. This is the superior mesenteric vein. Okay, which are present anterior. So what are the posterior relations? Posteriorly, we have one muscle here. This is called as the psoas major. There are two psoas, right and left. Okay, So the right is in relation to the posterior relation, as well as even the inferior vena cava. If you see here, this is inferior vena cava, which is posterior, as well as the abdominal aorta. You can see, you can appreciate, this is the right psoas major, inferior vena cava, and the abdominal aorta. All are in posterior relation to the third part, horizontal part of the duodenum. Then even the inferior mesenteric vessels, these are the superior mesenteric vessels which are in the front. Posteriorly, we can see the inferior mesenteric vessels. Here, not they are not shown, but usually there will be inferior mesenteric vessels, which are the supplying the hind gut part. That is the artery of the hind gut, so it will be supplying the hind gut. Okay. Coming to the fourth part, which is a short part, ascending part. Anteriorly, it is related to the small intestine, just like the third part. Posteriorly, it is related to the left psoas. If you see here, this is the fourth part, which is related to this is the psoas major muscle, okay, which comes below and joins with the iliacus, and it forms iliopsoas muscle. Iliopsoas. So here is the psoas muscle. Okay, so it is in posterior relation. So these are some of the important relations of the duodenum. Okay, now coming to the jejunum and ileum. Okay, these are 6 meters long, very long. So the duodenum was just 10 inches, but this is very long jejunum and ileum, which is almost 6 meters. It is in meters, not in inches. It is in meters. So it is highly coiled tube, and it is 6 meters long. Okay. Beginning from the duodenojejunal flexure, where the duodenum ends, so there is the beginning of the jejunum. So it is from the beginning of the duodenojejunal flexure and terminates where it joins with the cecum, the large intestine, the first part of the small intestine, large intestine called as the cecum. So that junction is called as the ileocecal junction. Okay. Covered by the mesentery, as we already seen, it has a long mesentery peritoneal fold, okay, and developed from the midgut. As we already seen, it developed from the midgut, and the artery will be supplying this part will be the artery of the midgut, that is the superior mesenteric artery, and the vein draining will be the superior mesenteric vein, and the lymphatic drainage will be through the superior mesenteric lymph node. So everything is superior mesenteric. If you remember one, you can write for all: superior mesenteric artery, superior mesenteric vein, as well as the superior mesenteric lymph nodes. Okay. Now coming to some of the differences between the jejunum and the ileum. Okay, jejunum and ileum, as you know, there are some differences, important differences, both histologically as well as the anatomically, gross as well as histologically. We'll study here some of the important features which you can even appreciate with the hand lens. Okay, so what are those? One is the length. The jejunum is shorter compared to the ileum, so it is longer. Out of the 6 meters, as we have seen, it is 6 meters long. Almost 2.5 meters will be for the jejunum, which is approximate 2/5, and the ileum will be 3/5, almost 3.5 meters long. Okay, so this will be 2/5 and this will be 3/5. So this ileum is longer than compared to the jejunum. If you see the diameter, this duodenum is wider compared to the ileum, which is narrow. So the duodenum, the lumen will be wider here compared to the ileum, where it is narrower. Okay, if you see the wall, the jejunum has thicker wall compared to the ileum, which has thinner wall. Okay, this thicker wall is because of the more plicae circularis. What are plicae circularis? These are nothing but the folds. Okay, folds of the intestine, wall of the intestine, that is called as the plicae circularis. Okay, so these are more in case of the jejunum compared to the ileum. If you see here, they are far off. Okay, so there are lesser plicae circularis, so the wall is thinner. Appearance, when we use a hand lens, as I said, and see, it will be dark red because of the more vascularity. More vessels are supplying the jejunum because of the absorption. Okay, so more absorption will be taking place here in the jejunum, so more blood vessels will be here. compared to the ileum, where there will be slightly lesser compared to the jejunum. So the blood vessels are lesser, so it is light red in color. Okay. Coming to the vessels, there will be lesser arterial arcades. If you see here, arching before the blood artery supply the intestine, they form arches. If you see here, they communicate with each other and they form arches. These are called as arterial arcades. Okay, so these arterial arcades are lesser here because there are more of the direct vessels supplying the jejunum. Okay, so more of long terminal branches will be there. So arterial arcades are lesser here. But in case of the ileum, more of the arterial arcades, these arching, communication, branching will be more here. Okay, so more arterial arcades, so there will be shorter terminal branches. If you see here, there are longer terminal branches. Here there are shorter terminal branches. All these we can see even with a hand lens. Okay, so these are some of the important features. Then the mesenteric fat, small amount near the intestinal border. You can see some quantity of the fat here in the jejunum, but there will be more amount of fat near the ileum. Coming to the aggregation of lymphoid tissue, you can see lymphoid tissues aggregation with again with the hand lens. Few aggregations can be seen here, but there will be more aggregation of lymph patches. These are called as Spear's patches, which are important in case of typhoid fever. They are affected in the typhoid fever. So these are nothing but the patches of the lymphoid follicles of the tissue. So there are numerous aggregation which you can see even with the naked eyes with the hand lens. So these are called as Spear's patches. They are more here. So these are some of the important differences between the jejunum and the ileum. Now coming to the parts of, after we finish the small intestine, we go to the large intestine. So this large intestine is divided into different parts. Okay, partly it is present in the abdomen, partly it is present in the pelvis, and partly it is present in the perineum. So the parts which are present in the abdomen are the first part of the large intestine, that is the cecum. Okay, so if you see here, this is the cecum, the first part of the large intestine, which is called as the cecum. Okay, so this is the ileum ending into the cecum. So this is the cecum. This is the ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon. All these are present in the abdomen. So cecum, then the appendix. If you see here, extension from the cecum, there is appendix. This is appendix. Then we have the ascending colon, right colic flexure. As you can see here, this is the ascending colon, right colic flexure, transverse colon, the left colic flexure, and the descending colon. Okay, transverse colon, descending colon. All these are present in the abdomen. Now, the remaining part will enter into the pelvis, that is especially the sigmoid colon and the rectum. If you see here, this S-shaped structure, this is called as the sigmoid colon. Okay, it looks like a S shape, so it's called a sigmoid. This is the sigmoid colon as well as the rectum. Okay, rectum. Both these are present in the pelvis. And the last part will be the anal canal, which is present in the perineum. So these are the different parts of large intestine which are present in abdomen, pelvis, and the perineum. Okay, the last part here, it will enter into the perineum. Now, how do you identify, how do you differentiate between the small intestine and large intestine? Because even though theoretically we think that it is easy, okay, but actually it is difficult. Actually, when you cut open the abdomen, sometimes it becomes very difficult. So you have to see for some characteristic features. There are typical features for the large intestine, which is also called as the colon in general. Okay, so so these characteristic features are three. They are number three. One is called as tinea coli. Second is the sacculation or horstrations. The third is the appendices epiploicae. Appendices epiploicae. The first one is the tinea coli. What are tinea coli? If you see here, they are long bands of fibers. These are nothing but if you study the histology, the wall will have the internal circular and external muscular fibers, smooth muscle fibers in the wall, internal circular and outer longitudinal. So these outer longitudinal, especially in case of the large intestine, they get aggregated into three regions. Okay, three regions, and they aggregate and they form this long band. These are called as tinea coli. So tinea coli are nothing but the three longitudinal muscle bands, one anterior and two posterior. If you see here, this is the anterior one, and there will be posterior. Here is one, and the other is on the other side. Okay, so these are the three tinea coli which will be seen only in case of the large intestine, not in the small intestine. The second feature is sacculations or hostration. These tinea coli, as I said, these are longitudinal fibers. They are shorter compared to the length of the large intestine. So they pull this whole of the large intestine into small pouches. Okay, because the tinea coli is shorter, so it folds the whole of the large intestine into small uh, uh, bags or pouches or whatever you call. These are called as sacculations or hostrations. They are called as the sacculation or the hostration. Okay, this is the inside view of how these sacculations or hostrations look like. Okay, so sacculation, hostration, tinea coli are shorter than the large intestine, which will make this whole of this large intestine to small bags. These are called as the hostrations, or they are also called as the sacculation, sacs, bags. Okay. The third feature is the appendices epiploicae. What is this? Short peritoneal fold filled with fat. If you see here, small fat can be seen within the folds of the peritoneum. Okay, so if you see here, these are called as these are nothing but the appendices epiploicae. These are nothing but the fat within the peritoneal folds. These are called as the appendices epiploicae. Appendices epiploicae. Okay. So these are the three features. One is the tinea coli, this long band. Then the second is the hostration or sacculations, bags. Then the third is the fat that is called as the appendix epiploidy. These are the three typical features of the large intestine. These are seen in all parts of the large intestine except in the rectum and the anal canal. Okay, even though the rectum and the anal canal are part of the large intestine, so but these features are not seen in the rectum. This is the rectum here, and lower part is the anal canal, where we don't see these features. Except this part, all other parts of the large intestine have these three features, with which you can differentiate between the large intestine as well as the small intestine. What are these? Once again, I repeat: tinea coli, sacculations, and the appendices epiploidy. Now coming to the coverings, peritoneal coverings of the large intestine. Just like the small intestine is covered by the peritoneum, partly the large intestine is covered by peritoneum and partly it is not. Okay. So the parts which are with the covering of the peritoneum are the transverse colon. Transverse colon. If you see here, this is the transverse colon which has a fold of peritoneum. Here, this is not called as mesentery, but this is called as mesocolon. Mesocolon is nothing but the peritoneal fold, just like the mesentery for the small intestine. So the large intestine also has a mesentery. It is not called as mesentery, but it is called as mesocolon. For this transverse colon, it is called as the transverse mesocolon. Okay. Then the sigmoid colon. Sigmoid colon also has, this is the sigmoid colon. It has a mesentery. This is called as the sigmoid mesocolon. Sigmoid mesocolon. Then the appendix. The appendix, here is the appendix. It also has a fold of peritoneum. So this is called as the mesoappendix. Okay. Then the cecum. Cecum also partly it is covered by the fold of the peritoneum. This is called as the again the mesentery for the cecum. That is called as the transverse cecum. Okay. Or the cecum mesocolon, whatever you call it. Okay. It doesn't have a specific name as such. Okay. So these are the important four parts which are covered by peritoneum. One is the transverse colon, which has a transverse mesocolon. Then the sigmoid colon, which has sigmoid mesocolon. Then the appendix, which has the mesoappendix, and the cecum. These are the four parts which have a mesentery, which are covered by peritoneum. But there are parts which are not covered by peritoneum. They are behind the peritoneum. So they are fixed parts. Which are those? These are the retroperitoneal parts. One is the ascending colon. If you see here, this ascending colon is retroperitoneal. It is behind the peritoneum. So there is no fold of the mesocolon here. Then the descending colon, also the This is the descending colon which doesn't have a mesentery or the mesocolon. Then the upper two-thirds of the rectum, upper two-thirds of the rectum. If you see here, this is the upper two-thirds of the rectum. It is also doesn't have a mesocolon. Okay, so these are the three important parts which doesn't have the covering of the peritoneum, or they are retroperitoneum. One is the ascending colon, one is the descending colon, and the upper two-thirds of the rectum. So all these are retroperitoneum. So you should know which parts are covered by peritoneum and which are not. Then the parts which are totally devoid of peritoneal covering, so they are not even retroperitoneum. They are not at all covered by peritoneum. Those are the lower one third of rectum and the anal canal. If you see this picture, so if you see here, this is the peritoneum fold. So it totally comes out from this part, and it doesn't cover the lower one third of the rectum as well as the anal canal. Okay, so there is no covering for the peritoneum for the lower one third of the rectum and the anal canal. So they are totally devoid of the peritoneal covering, these two parts. Now coming to a very important structure which is very notorious for infections and creating a lot of problem, especially in case of teenage. So this is the appendix. Appendix. Okay, so here will be the appendix. This is the cecum, and here is the appendix here. So the base of the appendix is marked by a very important point called as the McBurney's point. So whenever you want to, if there is appendicitis, as I said, it is notorious for infections, especially in teenage group. So whenever there is infection and you are supposed to remove the appendix, so it is very difficult to trace this structure because it has a mesentery. It is keep on moving. So you have to know the base where it is attached. It is attached to the cecum. So how do you ligate this so that you can trace the appendix itself? You have to trace it at the base. So this is marked by something called as McBurney's point. The base of the appendix is marked by the McBurney's point. Here is the McBurney's point. So how do you locate this on the surface of the abdomen? If your surgeons want to operate on the appendix, so he will locate the McBurney's point and then he will take the incision. So what is this point? Okay, so a point at the junction of the lateral one third and medial two thirds of a line traced from the right anterior superior iliac spine to the umbilicus. From the umbilicus to the anterior superior iliac spine. This is the most anterior bony projection in the pelvis. You can feel it even from outside. So if you feel your own pelvis, most anteriorly you can feel a bony projection that is called as the anterior superior iliac spine. So draw a line from the anterior superior iliac spine to the umbilicus. Okay. So divide into parts, and the junction between the medial two thirds and the lateral one third. This junction between the medial two thirds and the lateral one third of the line drawn from the anterior superior iliac spine to the umbilicus. This point is called as the McBurney's point. This is very important for the surgeons as well as even for the physicians when they are examining the patient of the appendicitis. So here you can see here, so this is called as the McBurney's point, which is the base of the appendix. Okay, so it is coming from the cecum, so this is called as the McBurney's point. Now, some features of the appendix. As I said, this is a very notorious structure. It keeps on moving because of the large peritoneal fold, which is within the peritoneal fold called as the mesoappendix. So you should know some of the features, and it is also prone for infection. So we'll study some of the important features of this. The opening of this appendix at the posterior medial aspect of the cecum, it opens into the appendix as a small opening. If you see the previous picture, you can appreciate here is the opening of this. This is the appendix, long appendix. This is the peritoneal fold, which is the mesoappendix, and it is opening here into the cecum. This opening is into the posterior medial aspect of the cecum, 1 inch below the ileocecal junction. If you see here, the junction between the ileum and the cecum. Okay. So if you see here, the junction between the ileum and the cecum, this is called a ileocecal junction. So the opening is here of the ileum. So 1 inch below, okay, so it is 1 inch below the ileocecal junction is the opening. So it is the ileum and it is opening the cecum. 1 inch below the opening of the cecum, ileum is the base of the appendix. Okay. So the positions, the appendix, as I said, it is keep on moving. So especially the the apex of this appendix. Okay, this is the base. So this is the apex. This is the body of the appendix. So it is mobile because of the long peritoneal port. So it has different positions. So the most commonest position where it will be present will be retrocecal. It is behind the cecum, always present. Retro means behind the cecum, so it is called a retrocecal. So this is the commonest position. Okay, so whenever you want to trace the base of the appendix and go behind the cecum, usually it will be traced there. If not, there will be other position. One is called as the pelvic position, so which is directly tracing towards the pelvis, directed towards the pelvis, so it is called as the pelvic. Then subcecal. Subcecal means below the cecum. Sub means below the cecum. This is called as the subcecal. Then, then pre-ileal and post-ileal. In front of the ileum, this is called as pre-ileal, and post-ileal behind the ileum, that is called posterior. These are the 5 positions, which are the positions, normal positions of the appendix. Okay, retrocecal, pelvic, subcecal, pre-ileal, and post-ileal. It is also sometimes uh, called as in clockwise direction, 11 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and such as this one. Okay, so these are the actually anatomical positions. Okay. The surgeons use the clock positions, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 11 o'clock positions, but anatomically we have specific names for them. Okay, coming to the relations and blood supply of the large intestine, as we know, till the junction between the right 2/3 and the left 1/3. So junction, the transverse colon, the junction between the right 2/3 and the left 1/3. So this is the point. So this, all the part before that, the large intestine developed from the midgut. Okay, then the remaining part, this is developing from the hindgut. Okay, so this junction of the right 2/3 and left 1/3 is very important. Okay, so this part, the part before this junction, is developing from the midgut. So it is supplied by the artery of the midgut, that is the superior mesenteric artery, and the nerve supply is by the autonomic nervous system. Whole of the GIT is supplied by the autonomic nervous system, but this part is supplied by the sympathetic and the vagus nerve. The parasympathetic will be vagus, and sympathetic will be from the different nerves. From the junction, from then onwards, from this junction afterwards, especially the transverse colon and descending colon, this is developing from the hindgut. So it is supplied by the artery of the hindgut, that is the inferior mesenteric artery, and the nerve supply is by the sympathetic nerves, as well as the parasympathetic is by the pelvic splanchnic nerves, not by the vagus, but the pelvic splanchnic nerves. Then coming to the anal canal. So this includes the rectum and the sigmoid colon. And now coming to the anal canal, the anal canal, especially the lower part, is developed from the ectoderm. Okay, and that is supplied by the inferior rectal artery. So it is neither from the foregut, midgut, or hindgut, but the last part of the anal canal, that is the lower part of the anal canal, is developing from the ectoderm, from outside. So that is supplied by the artery which is supplying the ectoderm, the outside part, that is the inferior rectal artery. And the nerves are from the somatic, because it is supplying, just developing from the skin and other structures. So it is supplied by somatic nerve, that is inferior rectal nerve. Now coming to the venous drainage of the gut, the veins draining the gut drain into the portal circulation. So all the veins which are draining from the gut are draining into the portal vein, and from there into the liver. So they will all go because and actually they drain into the liver. So for the metabolism to take place, because all these parts are absorbing the nutrition from different parts of the intestine, small intestine, large intestine. Okay, so all they will be draining into the liver for metabolism. So veins draining the gut from the portal circulation. So through the portal circulation, they drain into the liver. All veins finally end into the portal vein, which enters the liver, as I said before. The portal vein is formed by the union of the two veins. One is the superior mesenteric vein and the splenic vein. If you see here, so this is the superior mesenteric vein joins with the splenic vein. This is the splenic vein coming from the spleen to form the portal vein. So portal vein is formed by the superior mesenteric vein and the splenic vein. Okay. Where is the inferior mesenteric vein then? So inferior mesenteric vein drains into the splenic vein and from there into the portal vein. Okay. So the portal vein is formed by the superior vein as well as the splenic vein behind the neck of the pancreas. Here if you see, it will be behind the neck of this portal vein if you want to trace, because in case of portal hypertension and other conditions, you are supposed to trace the portal vein. So at that time, it can trace the portal vein behind the neck of the pancreas. Again, you'll study when you study the pancreas, the relations. At that time, you see that it is the neck of the pancreas behind posterior relation will be the portal vein. Very important relation. Now coming to the some of the important relations anteriorly, the cecum, the first part of the large intestine, uh, as well as the ascending colon as well as descending colon. Okay, so what are the anterior relations? Most of these parts are fixed, so we can easily trace the anterior relation and other relations. Anteriorly, as we can see here, the whole of the abdomen is filled with the small intestine. So the coils of the small intestine will also cover the cecum and the ascending and descending colon. Here, the small intestine has been removed, so you can appreciate the ascending colon, descending colon, and the cecum. But with the covering of when there are intestine, then it will be totally cover this anteriorly. Okay. Then the anterior abdominal wall. The most anterior will be this is the anterior abdominal wall, which covers the all these parts. As well as the great omentum. This is the great omentum, a fold of peritoneum filled with fat, which is also called as the policeman of the abdomen. Okay, so this is the great omentum, which is covering the. So it has been reflected so that you can appreciate the ascending and descending. If not, it will totally cover this ascending and descending and cecum. Then going to the posterior relation, again you can see here, this is the ascending colon, this is the cecum and descending colon. So what are the relations? If you see the cecum, you can see it sitting on the psoas major. Again, still there is psoas major muscle coming down. So this is the psoas major muscle as well as the iliacus on the other side. So these two muscles together they call as iliopsoas, as I said before. So both these muscles form the posterior relation to the cecum. Then we have the ascending colon. This is ascending colon. So what is posteriorly to it? One is the iliacus as well as the quadratus lumborum. There is a muscle here called as the quadratus lumborum and the iliacus. You already saw the iliacus. Both these muscles, quadratus lumborum and the iliacus, form the posterior relation. Coming to the descending colon, this is the descending colon here. The left kidney is posteriorly, then the quadratus lumborum here, then the iliacus, as well as even partly there is psoas major. So all these form the, especially the left kidney, the quadratus lumborum, as well as the psoas major. These form the posterior relations. Now coming to the mobile parts, that is the transverse colon. One is the transverse colon here. Okay, so what are the relations anteriorly? The greater omentum, as you can see here, the greater omentum, this is the greater omentum. So when it is put down, so this is how it looks like. Transverse colon is deep inside, and here is the greater colon, or the greater omentum. Okay, as well as the anti-abdominal, both are in anterior relation. Superiorly, if you see, so here this is transverse colon, here will be transverse colon. Superiorly we have the liver and the gallbladder as well as the stomach. All these are superior relations of the transverse colon. If you see here, this is the transverse colon, this is the stomach, liver, gallbladder. These two have been reflected, so you can appreciate the transverse colon as well as stomach. All these are superior to the transverse colon. Here the transverse colon has been cut so that you can appreciate the posterior relations. Posterior relations, we have the second part of the duodenum. You can see it is the second part of duodenum as well as the pancreas, which will be posteriorly. Here the transverse colon has been cut. If not, it will be behind this. Okay, so it has been cut so that you can appreciate the important relation, posterior relation. One is the second part of duodenum and the pancreas. Then inferiorly, it is filled with the coils of the small intestine. Inferiorly, as you can see here, below this will be the full of small intestine. Now coming to the two flexures which I was talking about. Flexures, as I said, are the bend. Okay, junctions between the ascending and transverse colon as well as the descending transverse colon and descending colon. So the bend between the ascending colon and the transverse colon, this is called as uh, the the hepatic flexure, or it is also called as the right colic flexure, or the hepatic flexure. Similarly, on the left side, we have the left colic flexure, or it is also called as the splenic flexure, because here it is in relation to the spleen. So here it is related to the liver, so hepatic. Here it is related to the spleen, so it is called as the splenic flexure or the left colic flexure. And if you see the position, it is lower because the liver is occupying this region, so it will be lower, but the left will be much more higher in position and more acute. Now coming to the rectum. Okay, so more details we'll study in the next class, but still we'll begin with a brief introduction to this. One is the rectum here. So here you can see, appreciate the rectum. So this is the rectum here after the sigmoid colon. So beginning as a continuation of the sigmoid colon, as I said, it continues uh, from the continuation of the sigmoid colon at the level of S3. Termination continues as the anal canal below. Below it will continue as the anal canal 1 inch below and in front of the tip of the coccyx. Behind we have the coccyx bone. Here if you see, here will be coccyx. So below that will be the anal canal. It ends into a dilated form which is called as a rectal ampulla. If you see, before the rectum ends into the anal canal, it forms a dilatation that is called as the rectal ampulla. Ampulla, a large dilated part. And the total length of the rectum is almost 5 inches. 5 inches. Coming to some relations of the rectum, there are some very important relations and there are differences in between the male and the female. Okay, posterior relation is same, common. Both, if you see here, this is the rectum, here is the rectum. In case of the female, this is the male. So posterior relation is same. It is the coccyx as well as the sacrum. Sacrum is above here, coccyx is below. Okay, sacrum and the coccyx. These are the coccyx. This is the sacrum, and the coccyx both. So it is the posterior relation is same. But anteriorly there is a difference because in case of the female there is the uterus and the vagina. So anteriorly it is related to the posterior wall of the vagina. Anteriorly it is related to the posterior wall of the vagina. So sometimes if you want to feel the posterior wall of the vagina, sometimes you can do PR examination to feel the vagina. Okay. In case of male, the relation is different because there is no uterus and the vagina. So anteriorly it is related to the seminal vesicles, the base of the bladder and the prostate gland. So prostate is below, the base of the bladder is above and the seminal vesicles. Okay. So anteriorly in case of male and the female it differs. So you should know the difference between the male and the female in relation to the rectum. So some clinical importances, this you will study again in detail in case of the pathology. Just a brief introduction. One is called as the diverticulosis. Diverticulosis. This is the herniation of the mucosa of the colon through the circular mucosal cord between the tinea coli. If you see, the tinea coli are some important regions and they are also lead to weakness within the wall and there is a perforation here, herniation to be more, not perforation, total opening. Herniation is just the invagination from the wall. Okay, so here you can see many diverticulosis. Okay, small herniation of the colon through the course of the muscles. Okay. It occurs through the weak points where the blood vessels pierce the muscle. So usually it occurs at those regions where the muscle will be supplying the muscles are supplied by the blood vessels. So these are called as diverticulosis. Okay. The second is the volvulus. This is a totally emergency condition because the mesentery of the sigmoid colon is long. It might rotate itself. It can obstruct the blood supply and lead to gangrene. So it can rotate on itself wherever there is mesentery. So it can lead to gangrenous stage and it is a medical emergency. Then there are some conditions called intersusception. Okay, telescoping of one part of the intestine into the other part. Okay, if you see a part of the small intestine has entered into the large intestine. This is called as intersusception. This is most seen in case of the children. Telescoping of the proximal bowel into the lumen of the distal segment. It is common in children and commonly it occurs at the ileocecal, the colocolic or the ilioileal varieties. So these are some of the common varieties which you will study again in the pathology. Okay. So these are some questions you can read. Okay, we'll end here and we'll continue with the next lecture after a 10 minutes break. We will have a 10 minutes break and later we'll continue with the next lecture. Okay. So if you have any doubts before that about this lecture, you can ask me.